Hello and welcome to this video on the Befaco Oneiroi, a Eurorack experimental instrument focused on ambience and droning soundscapes. Here's what's to come. This video is sponsored by Befaco. Let me preface this by going through what we're doing here. As Oneiroi is a whole synth voice and instrument within itself, I wanted to first share my literal first patch, showing what I got, and similarly what you might get, from the instrument out of the box. This is without reading the manual or learning anything, and just embracing the controls and playing around. After that first patch, when I've read the manual and learnt the thing to make the video, I'll go through Oneiroi and then go through the features and sounds with a variety of musical examples. There's a detailed timing index in the description if you'd like to skip around the video. There's a lot to talk about and a lot to explore. So let's first get into my literal first patch. So if you're anything like me, you've come to Oneiroi thinking of it of this kind of drone, ambience, effects and texture generator. And here's my first patch that was very much lent into that without reading the manual, so I wanted to share this at the start of the video as a literal first patch, first experiences, and almost the kind of basics of just getting up and running into these nice ambiences that I think Oneiroi is going to really excel at. So turning down my dry wets, unplugging some modulation and inputs, and clearing the looper, let's start by rebuilding my literal first patch. I'd like to start with a droning supersaw. I'm going to hold shift and shift down. Into this deep, nice deep tuning there, lots of detune on these supersaws. This kind of thick smog. Let's go fully wet on the filter. I've patched in 4 external LFOs, green trace modulating the filter. We'll add some of the resonator here, giving these kind of flanger-like comb filter sounds that's modulated by the blue trace and cable. We'll just have a little bit of that echo. The density of the echo modulated by this red trace, orange cable. And some ambience. The SPACETIME, which does multiple things, modulated by this yellow trace. So it's a kind of thick, soupy drone. With the effects, we'll have the looper set to post here, so it's going to record the output Let's just record this as a bed to work on top of. So that will do for the loop. I'll stop recording. Let's listen to what we've captured. So there we have a kind of bass drone layer. Now I want to add in a sine wave sequence. I don't want to work in this lower octave, so let's shift up. Let's add a sequence to the upper octave. We'll add let's add a little bit of this filter to it, even though it's not really going to filter much here. A little bit of resonator. Quite a lot of echo. And some ambience. We have this lovely morphing, shifting, clean sequence. And those effects trail off really nicely. So we'll start with the base of the loop. As these aren't fully down, they're not dry, we are going to reprocess this loop, including it going through the effects and being captured. So we're adding effects to effects effectively. But I've certainly got no problem with that. And then let's add this sine on top. You can fade in the supersaw. Now let's even just plug in some noise into the input here and just fade some noise into these effects. Drop the sine down an octave. I think this is going to be pretty typical of what Oneiroi really excels at. It's the kind of thing I'd heard in the demos that had me excited about it, and I just wanted to share this first patch experience as the first part of the video. So what is Oneiroi? Well, you just heard what it does out of the box with that first patch, and Befaco say that Oneiroi is an experimental synth voice focused on ambient pads and drone-like soundscapes. It's also named after the personification of dreams in Greek mythology, which ties it into the Greek gods or the spirits of dreams. Mythology buffs or not, Oneiroi can certainly sound pretty dreamy pretty easily. And as a brief, more technical overview, Oneiroi is a series of sound generators, a looper, onboard modulation and randomizer, and a series of effects. But I'd also like to highlight what Oneiroi doesn't do, or what it's not. It's not a standard synth voice, in the sense of VCO into VCF into VCA, although it has a lot of those controls. You can't modulate quickly, such as with snappy envelopes or audio rate modulation, as the CV inputs are smoothed for better operation on the OWL platform that it's built upon, and to lean into its intention as an ambient soundscape-driven instrument. I'd also like to point out that the looper was designed with the intention of working like a playful sketchpad for capturing external inputs, or the sound generation and effects from Oneiroi itself. It does have external sync inputs and record triggering, however it's not meant to be a tempo-synced rhythmic looper, and I did struggle to get it to work that way when I tried, and sometimes got some clicks as things looped. I asked Befaco about this, and they told me the intention of the looper is to quickly capture and manipulate sounds in a free and playful way. However, they are working on a firmware update for the future, where you can more easily record tempo-synced rhythmic loops, and also to remove any clicks that you may hear. I've put a lot of time and effort into the timing index and the chapter markings for the video, so rather than verbally run down every single feature on Oneiroi, as it would take a long time and a lot more talking, let's explore and learn about it alongside musical examples through the sections in the video. Use those timings in the video description to skip around if you like. But to quickly overview it and some things we don't cover in the video, we have all the core controls as white text and shift functions as inverted black text with white borders around them. The buttons are both momentary and toggling in behaviour, such as holding shift and doing something, or just toggling shift on and off with a simple press. Our onboard oscillator is a dual sine wave, supersaw or wavetable, and we can also blend in our looper and audio inputs in this sound generation section. External inputs can be anything from contact mics and guitars straight in, through to line level or Eurorack levels. The Varispeed looper also has a sound on sound functionality, and we have onboard modulation that's easily routed by pressing mod amount and turning the knobs that you want that to modulate. Similarly, the shift function there for the mod amount, highlights green instead of red, is the CV amount control, where you can scale and attenuate, or even attenuate if you set it that way, external incoming CV. We have a multi-mode filter, resonator, echo and ambience effects, all of which is stereo, as are the oscillators and the looper. We also have onboard randomization via button or CV, where you can randomize all of Oneiroi or just certain sections in varying amounts of randomization. I strongly suggest reading the manual for all the finer details, but without further ado, let's dive in. So here we'll take a look at the oscillator and sound generator section. We have the volumes here, and we have volume CVs for them as well. Let's start with the sine wave. Sounds like a sine. We then have a supersaw, inspired by the Roland JP8000. And this has a detune control. This can also be a wavetable, selected on this switch. And then we have an offset for the table of waves. That's noisy for a particular reason that we'll come to shortly. We have our input level for our stereo input, so you can run other audio sources through the filtering and the effects, and capture that input in the looper as well if you wish. And we have the level of the looper, and by default, the looper's buffer is filled with noise. You can vary speed and loop chunks of that noise. And that noise is where the wavetable came from. By default, and the only way the wavetables work, is that they take chunks of audio from the looper's buffer. It takes 32 chunks from 2048 samples of audio internally, and you then offset between them. And that's why these sound particularly noisy, because it's making a wavetable out of the noise in the buffer. Our tuning controls are on the main pitch control, going up and down at 6 semitones. The shift function there turns it into an octave switch. And of course we have our volt per octave. The shift function also changes this detune or offset control for the supersaw or wavetables into a unison control. And for this sine wave, that reveals that we actually have 2 sine wave oscillators here. In that central position, it kind of locks into unison tuning, and then left of center, we pitch down the second sine wave oscillator up to an octave below. And going clockwise from center, you find nice chord tones along the way. We can go up to an octave. Plugging in a volt per octave sequence here. These 2 sines work really well into some effects. It's easy to get carried away. Let's offset this back to center. And that unison control will offset the tuning of the supersaw too. So let's go back to the wavetables here and try to create something more musical than just using the noise in the looper buffer. I'm going to set the looper to post, and we'll look at looping and recording in more detail later, but just quickly, let's go for a filtered, affected, droning sound, and capture this set to post in the looper's buffer. So let's listen to that looper. We've captured all of that audio that we've just heard by setting it to post to record the output back into the looper. That audio buffer is now going to form the wavetable. By default, 32 chunks of audio as a wavetable. So we'll switch to wavetable on the supersaw wavetable here. And this is what it's given us. Let's pitch down an octave. And now this offset control gives variations of a kind of lo-fi, very digital sounding, kind of formant, hard sync locked tone. And a lot of what I've tried here making wavetables before filming this video gives similar results. Blends against the sine well. Let's try sequencing between this offset. Let's get this wavetable dancing around. So the wavetable forms a nice additional tone to play with and process through Oneiroi. So here we'll take a look at the filter, the different filter modes and how it sounds and the resonant character, and we'll go with what I consider a fairly universal filter test, which is a low-pitched saw wave. We could use the onboard supersaw, but I'm using an external static saw wave here, just for a purer kind of filter test if you like. Going fully wet on the filter. Here's the low pass. And you don't need to add much resonance to really start to add some character. It's got that really vocal kind of chewy sound. When we push the resonance up past 75%, it actually introduces a noise effect that's then refiltered by the filter. And we'll have another look at that in another section. Now holding shift, the filter cutoff control becomes a filter type. We have a band as our second filter type here. And then we have a high pass. And the high pass does fully close. You can hear it silent. And as I bring down the cutoff, with a really smooth reintroduction of that input with some resonance. This is particularly nice with that noise you can introduce with resonance up full. And then the fourth filter mode here is a comb. Works well with the supersaw. And a bit of And if you really want to go all out, you could then go into the resonator as well for even more comb filter action. That's quite nice. It's like a swarm of bees going past. So as we just saw in the main filter section of this video, there's an inbuilt chaotic noise generator in the filter section. I have no inputs, all the inputs are turned down here, we're fully wet on the filter, no additional effects. And this happens, as indicated by this dotted line, when we go above 75% on the resonance control. The filter is set to be a low pass, cut off wide open. So as I slowly introduce this noise, this mixes into the input section of the filter, and it then filters itself, if you like, considering the noise is part of the filter section. We filter the noise. But you can hear that it's not just a simple white noise that then has a filter sweep. The character of the noise changes with that frequency control too. And this is like a digital clocked noise where we're actually downsampling the rate of noise generation. Let's try, say, the bandpass. Or the high. And the comb. Lovely vocal kind of quality there. We'll go back to a low pass here. And this works really well as an exciter for the resonator. It's going fully wet on the resonator. And then save a little effects. Or a lot of effects. What a nice addition, some chaotic noises. So here we'll take a look at the resonator effect. And my input here is some stereo, already complex material, where I have a kind of acidic synth voice panning around already to create a stereo image, and it has some stereo delay on it. That all happens before it comes into Oneiroi at the input stage. Now the resonator is made up of 3 stereo comb filters, and we can tune their kind of bass tuning. With a shift function for dissonance, we can offset the tuning of them and create chord-like tones or dissonances, and we have a feedback control. Now on this complex material, we will simplify this with some simpler sounds, but I really like it on this. Let's go fully wet and listen to that tuning. We go from shorter comb filter flanger-like sounds. Adding feedback, we can actually make this self-oscillate. And with low feedback, really tighten up this effect. Just leave it somewhere in the middle for now. And then at lower tunings, we have these kind of fast, zappy, robotic delays. that with lower feedback and lower mix levels, create that kind of classic electro sound and feel. Sticking with the same input, let's lose the delay and really shorten these notes to just these little kind of clicks, and we're going to treat this like we're pinging the resonator here and listen to the dissonance effect. Going with a higher tuning and more feedback. Hitting shift for the function, you could hold it or toggle it as we've seen. You'll hear these tunings start to move. And all the way clockwise, we have a chord tone. And this can work really well over just droning oscillator waves. So let's lose our input and just listen to the supersaw. Going fully wet. Instant drone and texture maker just from a supersaw. It's a really lovely stereo image. Let's first filter this saw. Then go fully wet again. Turning dissonance back down. Let's just quickly hear a drum beat through the resonator too. So here's a simple drum beat. Let's go back into that resonator. And we'll start with those nice zappy, classic zappy robotic delay sounds. Let's excite some chordal tones with the dissonance up full. We'll actually sequence the tuning here to get a pattern that evolves along with the beat. It's quite a hooky, funky little thing. So let's take a look at the echo here, and we'll do this with a simple drum beat. Drums come into the input up full, and here it is dry. In the sync input, I have a trigger twice every bar, so every 8 steps of a 16-step drum sequence here. And bringing up the wet level for the echo, we can hear with the sync input, the echo is in time. And hopefully you can hear that stereo effect from this 2-tap delay. Repeats are our feedback. Let's go fully wet. Low repeats. Decays very quickly. And with higher repeats, as you'd expect, this feedbacks over a longer period of time. Now the density controls time. And this divides down the sync. It works with that clock there. And if we go fully wet here, there is a shift function on the density control, which is a DJ style filter. so toggle on shift. In the center, this is off. We can consider this not filtered. High pass filter going clockwise from center. Really nice for busier delays that staying that top end out of the way and don't interfere with the kick. And then going left of center anti-clockwise. This low pass filters. So let's use some CV here. This is a random voltage along with the sync input, so twice every bar, once every 8 steps. And we'll randomly change delay time by modulating density. We could use the dry-wet CVs here to push in and out of the wet and dry sound. Let's take an LFO straight into the echo, just a simple slow triangle here. And you can hear our little flurries of echo just pushing in and out. So let's explore the ambience effect. I'm coming in stereo from a mutable instrument's rings. We're not going to use the oscillator here. And let's just dial in an effect to talk over. Ambience is loosely based on a Schroeder reverberator, and it has a decay control for how long and decaying this ambience effect is, and a macro control called SPACETIME. When SPACETIME is in its mid position, let's go fully wet here, we have the shortest, brightest ambient effect. Going all the way anti-clockwise or all the way clockwise leads to a much duller but much longer effect. You hear these delay lines in this ambient kind of DSP open up in time and get longer and filter with a low pass. So darker, longer delays with the decay control there. And going left of center, there's a little rewind icon here, anti-clockwise from 12, the mid position. The actual ambient effect reverses. So listen as I just dial left of center there. You hear these swells and kind of sucks of sound. So we have the same thing, getting longer and darker, but with this reverse effect. It's quite fun to modulate, quite heavy-handedly modulate this macro control space-time here. Let's do so with a sequence. It's almost like a glitchy beat repeat over an ambient reverb. And I really like how that blends against the dry sound. Pump up the decay. And you don't have to be so heavy-handed with the modulation, or you could modulate, say, dry-wet time on the dry-wet CVs there for ambience. That's quite fun if we say filter the input. And go into varying step modulated amounts of wet effect. And just setting up a fairly simple ambience effect here, let's go fully wet and explore this auto pan. The space-time control becomes a macro control of an auto panner in this ambient effects section. It now controls the intensity of an autopan effect and the rate of it, working with different clock divisions based on the sync input. If you can hear that wobbling. Let's set up a longer effect here. Little bit of dry. And then play with this auto pan. Can be quite subtle. And we can create these huge decaying ambiences that last a long time, even after removing the input. So as the shift function on the resonance control, we can see we have pos for position, POS, position. And this is the position of the filter relative to the other effects. And the filter is the only one of these four things, filter, resonator, echo, and ambience, that we can move around through the processing chain. Here I have a simple sequence, filter fully wet, with a little bit of delay and ambient effect after it. And as the delay and ambience are after the filter, they of course trail away even when I've low pass filtered away my input sound. Hitting shift, we can place the filter after the resonator. However, I'm not using the resonator, so we'll go straight to the third position here, which will position the filter after the echo. So you can hear this time it's just the ambience trailing away. Now in the fourth position, this is the filter at the end of the chain, again hitting shift and turning the resonance for position. The filter's end of chain, and therefore filters away those effects. And just to use that resonator here, if we were to put this second in the chain, if you wanted to go resonator, filter, echo, ambience. Here we'll take a look at the modulation, and we'll just start with the basics, the type, speed and depth control of the onboard modulation. We'll use a supersaw droning here, maybe add a bit of noise, go fully wet on the filter, add a little bit of effects just for fun. And this is going to be the sound that we use to then modulate the filter. Hopefully it's a really obvious example of what's going on here. By default, the modulation routes to the filter cutoff, so simply turning up mod amount, we can hear the effect of the modulation. And we'll get into routing it to lots of other things shortly, and how we can use clock sync with the sync input here. By default, the speed of the LFO, or the rate of the modulation, is tied to the looper buffer. Speed is controlled on this knob, and it can divide or multiply 16 times. Based on what it's syncing to. As I say, by default that's the looper. We'll use the sync input shortly. And going through the shapes here, we start with a chaotic, smooth, random modulation. It kind of sounds like sine waves that are getting louder and quieter, like randomly riding some waves or something. Pressing Shift, this becomes a modulation type, i.e. LFO wave shape, and we can move that across to be a sine. It can be a rising ramp, a falling ramp, a square wave, sample and hold, stepped random. Let's put the speed up for this. And we also have an envelope follower based on these inputs. We'll come to that envelope follower shortly. So with the sample and hold style stepped random modulation there, let's get a basic pitch sequence going on the oscillator and sync the modulation to it. So here I have a pitch sequence coming into the supersaw oscillator here. I'm sending a quarter note clock in. This is moving at 16th notes. We're still on the stepped random and I've put the speed in the mid position. So as I turn up the mod depth, dugga 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 yanda, 2 yanda, 3 yanda, 4 yanda. You get the idea. Every 4 notes, this is moving through a random value. And as I come right of center, we'll move at faster rates relative to the sync input. And you can hear that modulation is in time and in sync with my pitch sequence. So assigning modulation beyond the default routing to the filter is really very simple. And for this example, I'd like to play around with the looper. So I've recorded in a loop, which is an old phone-in clock service. Very BBC Queen's English. Now turning up modulation fully, this is a kind of master depth control if you like, and just simply pressing mod amount and then turning the knobs, it will assign this modulation to them. So if I was to set it to, say, the length, we can hear the length of that loop changing. And I can vary that or override it by turning down the mod. Now let's send this into the resonator. We'll hit mod amount, turn the resonator. We can have a small amount or a large amount. Let's have a smaller amount. Turn down the mix slightly. Slow down our modulation. Let's hit mod again. Change the Varispeed. Let's have this really wide. Have some start position. Let's have some ambience, some echo. Just kind of assigning it to all sorts here in varying degrees. And you can hear a couple of simple knob turns go totally wild here. So assigning modulation is really as simple as that. Press the button, turn the knobs, press it again to come out of that mode. Looking at the envelope follower here, let's make this module kind of dance around a classic drum break. Now the input to Oneiroi and a copy of this input goes to my mixer is a classic drum break. So that's in the mixer for us to mix with the output of Oneiroi, and it's also here as an input to it. I'll be keeping that volume down as I don't want to hear it through Oneiroi, but I want to use its envelope with the envelope follower to modulate it. So hitting Shift, I'll set my modulation type all the way around to envelope follower. I'm going to turn up the supersaw, go fully wet on the filter. And let's just see what happens when we turn that mod depth up. It's already routed to the filter's cutoff. And you can hear that groove and feel of the drum break modulating the filter already. The speed control becomes like the attack and release of the followed envelope, all the way right. It's very quickly following the audio that's coming in, resulting in this fast, wobbly, kind of uncomfortable sound. So backing that speed off to smooth out this extracted envelope. That works for me. Let's add some more modulation. Let's mix it against the drums. Now looking at the looper here, let's just really basically capture some sound. I'm using an external input here, which is a stereo signal from Mutable Instruments rings. And I'm just going to freely record this, pressing record and pressing it again to stop recording. So that should be captured now. I had this set to pre, which is rather than recording post, the whole output and the effects, we've recorded pre, meaning we record the input, and the input level switch was down for Eurorack level. So we have our Varispeed, which will go from off in the center, forward playback in varying pitches and speeds, and then reverse from center if we go anti-clockwise. We can close that loop length down. And then use start to scan through the buffer. And if it's these kind of short repeating loops that we want here that are quite rhythmic, we could take something like a clock from our sequencer. Tuesday here was sequencing rings on the way in. I'm going to patch a 16th note clock to sync in, and that's now playing relative to the input. This small chunk of audio. Again, moving start time. We can close that length down even more. Sync in is like a reset. Let's take a sequence and modulate start time, or start position. Full on and glitchy. Let's move our sync to be a quarter note clock. That's quite a nice loop. Like a nice buffer freeze in the background. Leaving this looping as it is, let's look at the Varispeed, where we can pitch up to 2 times faster and an octave higher. We slow down from ×1 speed through 0 to reversing. We can have this reverse loop here. All quite nice to layer over this type of patching. Without the sync. And now this slower pitch down version. It's gritty and moody. Let's add some filtering, some resonator, echoes, even with just basic looping, it's really easy to get carried away. So this kind of generative glitch machine that I have going on here came from me trying to record a loop that was in sync to play around with some beats. I failed at doing so, I couldn't get it to loop nicely here, but what it led to was this. All these nice little generative glitches. So let's unpatch and rebuild this up from scratch. So I have a copy of my beat here in my mixer that's currently muted. It's also coming in as the input to Oneiroi. So if we simply turn the input up, all the effects down. There's some panning on this hi-hats. It's already in stereo and there's a bit of a delay on the snare drum. So I just want to capture this in the looper. I'm not too worried about timing. As I say, I failed at getting this to actually work in time. Set loop to pre here and just record some. Let's listen to it through Oneiroi while it's recording. So that should be enough, and I should have a buffer full. We've got the beat there in the looper. That's all that's playing, and the beat in my mixer, where I'm going to mix it against these effects, is muted. So just the looper. And then using a quarter note trigger to the sync input, that's going to trigger the modulation, which is set to be sample and hold, stepped random voltages here. So let's hit mod amount, go full on Varispeed, start, and length, and just set these somewhere. There's all sorts of awesome glitches come out. Another way you could do this is to not use the random modulation and just use the actual randomizer on Oneiroi. So I'm going to go to all, full amount, and let's use this quarter note trigger to the random. Leave the looper up full. Quite like bits of that ambience, but I don't want it all the time. So again, we'll use our modulator externally. Same for the resonator. I'm actually going to use the yellow signal that was bringing the looper in to the echo this time. Mega glitches. Let's bring that in against the beat. This would be really nice with speeches, vocal samples, and other bits of sounds that aren't just beats in Oneiroi. Really mangling the hell out of everything. So here we'll explore the looper and its sound on sound function. I have my inputs here, turn the looper down, I'm not recording, and coming in is a guitar, straight in just through an adapter to the mini jack, and that full gain is suitable for contact mics, pickups and that kind of thing. Here's a quick chord. Nice clean guitar tone. Now if I hit record and turn up the looper, now by pressing shift and turning up start, we have a sound on sound function. Turning start all the way up, or sound on sound all the way up, because shift is enabled. Let's fade in a chord tone. Just playing a guitar, you can hear this now, endlessly repeats. I can play over the top. And this will just keep repeating. Sound on sound is full. It's like removing the erase head from a tape loop. Now let's stop recording and just clear that, holding shift and pressing record. This time I'm going to set the sound on sound, so the start dial but with shift on for SOS. I'm going to set that around halfway. I'll hit record again. Let's play in some chords and notes here. I'm going to add some effects, turning up the echo and reverb. and we'll hear these decay away. Now the effects are helping that trail if I remove them. You can hear that chord tone's near enough gone now. Let's play a different chord tone. And again, play over the top. We can hear this is fading away. We also have a DJ style filter for this fading loop. That's the shift function for the length control there. If I go right from center, where its default position is off, this is DJ style where we high pass to the right. So let's play into this. You can hear the low end has gone, but the top end of the guitar is still there. If we go left of center, this will low pass filter. So again, let's play in a chord. And you can hear that low pass filter away. While this might be a bit dry, I just wanted to explain how it worked, and also quite dry in sound. Let's turn that echoer and ambient effect back up, and play around with a decaying loop that's decaying through a low pass filter. I could play this all day, especially with a guitar. Works really well with lots of different instruments to have these sound on sound decaying loops or constant loops that just build on top of each other. Let's just have another no filtering, and this time let's do it in reverse. So you're hearing me play dry, and one thing that's really nice here, when I actually remove myself from the mix and just hear the looped effect. Bring me back into the mix so you can hear what's going in, and then we'll stick to the reverse loop coming out. Okay, I'll stop. This video is definitely long enough as it is. So on board on Oneiroi, we have a randomizer, and I've always loved random functions as really musical modulation, or really extreme modulation, as it allows you to explore a wide range of a piece of equipment by just fully randomizing everything and seeing what you get. And we're going to do that shortly, a fully random doomscape just with Oneiroi. But let's say in this instance we have a nice sequence. that we're happy with and we just musically want it to evolve over time. Now with the randomizer, patch out my trigger here to the random, we can randomize all, which is the oscillator, looper and effects, just the oscillator, just the looper or just the effects. I just want to do the effects here. The random function doesn't change the sliders or secondary shift functions. Let's add in some filtering, not fully wet, some resonator, some delay, and some ambience. And then we have an amount control, which is around 2% plus or minus variation, or the potential of 2% in that bottom position. In the mid position, we have the potential for a 20% variation plus or minus current values. And we have full randomization. If I hit random, let's go fully wet, you'll hear this effect more clearly. And let's say you go too far, you really like the previous version, the secondary function for the random button is an undo or redo. So holding shift, you can go back to the previous state. If you want to clear all randomization and revert back to the knob positions, shift, record and random takes you back to where you were. Now I'm going to go with subtle variation, so stick with the switch at the bottom. I have a sync input which is playing every time my sequence comes round, and then I'm making sure I hit every time the sequence comes round, but also some probabilities that extra gates will fire. So let's go back into a blend of effects and just deviate slowly over time just in the effects section. Now we've had some more subtle randomization and taken a look at the feature, let's get into a full-on random doomscape. So here we're going fully random, just to let lots of Oneiroi tones fly by. I have a quarter note clock coming in from my pattern generator and a gate pattern to the random. I'm randomizing everything, so the switch is set to all, and the amount is set to be full. Now where this really comes to life is setting the looper to post, capturing some of this randomness and letting the new random values play with the looper too. So let's hit record. And then see what the looper's doing. Looper sounds like it's having a good time. Let's bring that sine wave in. I like the droning sine and effects changing, and this looper just spitting out something really gnarly over the top occasionally. So if you're still with me, go drop a hard sync in the comments. What a fun thing Oneiroi is. I keep finding myself drawn into it and losing track of time just playing around with different approaches and different musical outcomes. Head over to patreon.com/divkid to support the work that I do. Hit like and subscribe, that all helps out the channel. And I'll see you next time. Bye!